Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review. I'm Asbed Bedrossian, and along with Asbed Kotchikian, this week we're going to continue to talk about the ongoing war in Artsakh. We're going to consider the following major aspects. First, we'll get an update on the progress of the war since our podcast last weekend. Then, we'll discuss the onset of international diplomacy that has finally ramped up around this conflict. And finally, we want to look into the social humanitarian impact that this war is having on Armenian society, not only in Artsakh, but also in Armenia and the diaspora communities. To talk about these issues, we have with us Lara Aharonian, who is a peace activist in Armenia and co-founder and co-director of the Women's Resource Center NGO at Armenian Women in Yerevan. Robert Avetisyan, who is the representative of the Nagorno Karabakh Republic in the United States, and Asbed Kotchikian, who is a senior lecturer of political science and international relations at Bentley University in Massachusetts. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello.
So for over 2 weeks now, the war in Artsakh has been raging with casualties mounting on both sides. On Saturday, October 10, a humanitarian ceasefire was brokered by Russia after an 11-hour marathon of intense negotiations between the Armenian, Azerbaijani, and Russian foreign ministers in Moscow. Not surprisingly, the ceasefire did not end the fighting and by some accounts intensified in some areas. There are even some accounts of drones over Armenia's southern province of Syunik. Robert Avetisyan, can you give us the current status of the security situation on the ground in Artsakh, and what's the current state of the ceasefire?
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for looping me in this discussion. Well, the initiative was not supposed to be a ceasefire. It was supposed to be humanitarian cessation of hostilities, like a temporary measure for humanitarian reasons to make sure that the parties can take the bodies from the battlefield, etc., and all the related issues. But when it was supposed to enter into force on October 10 at 12 noon, but at 12:03 we actually saw a major attack on Hadrut using all sorts of artillery fire, the long-range missiles, and attempt penetration by the special forces. So the ceasefire was pretty much broke 3 minutes after it was supposed to go into action. And after that, of course, the major escalation took place, as always, as what they were promising. I mean, there is no any surprise, because Aliyev and Erdogan and everyone who is backing them, they were saying that we're going to continue the fighting, we're not giving any chance to this, we have to finish the job and finish the mission of their forefathers, that those were actually words of Erdogan. So we didn't have any utopia, of course, we were on alert. And those who know the situation between Artsakh and Azerbaijan know that the one thing we lack many things, but one of them is trust. Azerbaijan is absolutely not a trustful partner for negotiations. That's why we were skeptical about its ability to follow own commitment, and unfortunately we were right. So the fighting continues. They're shelling all the major communities along the front line. We heard some blasts near Stepanakert yesterday. We heard some air siren going off a few times yesterday and today. Reconnaissance and attack drones continue to fly all over the Republic. Today, a couple of hours ago, we had even airstrikes, and our army shot down one of the attack jets by Azerbaijan. So it's pretty much the same full-scale war, just like it was on September 27 at 7 a.m. when they attacked sleeping houses all over the Republic of Artsakh.
Robert, this is Asbed Kotchikian. I wanted to ask specifically in Stepanakert, the situation where you currently are, in terms of the overall mood, the overall sense. And I'm not just talking about the military mood, but also the overall morale of the people. I mean, I know at times of war, many of us here have lived through war and we know how it can take a toll on people. But what are you seeing in terms of families, in terms of people, children, women in shelters and so on?
Hello, Asbed. Well, it will be strange to imagine that we enjoy all this, of course, but few things are kind of in our favor. One is that this is not the first time we see all this. Every Stepanakertsi of my age and slightly younger even generation, they've gone 3 times through the same sort of threats and aggression and missiles and rockets. We know all the basements, we know all the safe basements and every shelter which is effective. And we've been preparing for the thing, of course. We knew that Azerbaijan was going to attack the heart of Artsakh, that they were always very open about it. So the morale is, of course, the negative part is that there is an aggression, is that Armenian army is doing whatever they can to fight against already 3 major powers here, which is Azerbaijan, and Turkey is pretty much hands-on, and international mercenaries from terrorist groups in northern Syria and Libya Libya. Those are the new factors which aggravate further and internationalize all this. But pretty much the idea of Azerbaijan was to instigate panic among the population or force us out. And we heard even the suggestions to leave Artsakh through the humanitarian corridor. That was the promise by Aliyev a few days ago. Of course, it's not happening. Stepanakert are here. Martuni residents are in the shelters. And if the situation is particularly grave, people choose to relocate, they're free to do so. But most of us, we know how to cope with it. We know how to not to allow the enemy to paralyze our life, and we are keeping up.
Robert, after the war erupted and during the first week, there was an eerie silence from the international diplomatic community, as if everyone was mesmerized by this 21st century drone war. But as the fighting entered the second week, France came in, then minor statements were made by the US State Department, and of course we've heard nothing from Trump himself. And finally, we also heard from Russia this past week, of course. Now that the Armenian and Azeri former ministers have started separate negotiations in Moscow, we've heard that the fundamental outline of a peace is probably going to be along the principles of status for territory. First, what do you make of this slow ramping of diplomacy to stop the violence? And second, what are our short and longer term goals?
Well, the diplomatic efforts, there were attempts from the day one to bring to cool down the situation on the ground. And again, this situation is pretty much unprecedented. It has a different paradigm because if Turkey has previously been a kind of behind-the-scene player in Azerbaijan's domestic and foreign policy, now they're completely hands-on. They do the command and control of the air forces. They pretty much assume also the command and control of the ground forces lately. And the international mercenaries are already in the region, and we know that they're here. And if they can stay, if they're allowed to stay in this region, they're going to stay here. That all probably was part of this new situation, was also one of the factors why, probably, I know we are guessing, why the major capitals, it took slightly longer to react and go beyond just expressing the concerns or calling the sides or the both sides to refrain from hostilities. But apparently, when everybody figured out that Azerbaijan's blitzkrieg has failed and there is no, again, military solution, and everybody got to understand that there is really, the situation is pretty much what Armenia and Artsakh have been saying for decades, that there is no military solution to this conflict. And this conflict just aggravates the situation and it kills the trust, even the seeds of trust between our peoples, and deepens the gap between us and complicates the settlement process. The major capitals began to step in. Yes, of course, considering all that bunch of bad guys who are fighting against us, we would like to see much more active involvement by the international community. And again, this is not just Artsakh-Azerbaijan conflict. Now we're talking about a different, wider conflict, something we were raising the red flag about for years, that if you don't call a spade, if you tolerate Azerbaijan's aggression in 1991 or in 2016, it's going to happen with a new scale. And unfortunately, at this time, we also were right. They're attacking us and they think that their military advantage or drones or all the major sophisticated weaponry and long-range missiles can change the situation and break us and make us leave. But apparently, as of now, 15 days after the aggression of the ongoing war, they know they cannot do a thing. And they don't even provide or deliver on the promises they have done to their own population. Where do we see this going? We think that at some point when Azerbaijan will be able to resist the continued pressure by Turkey to continue this fight, they will be more open to negotiations and return to the most productive format of negotiations, which includes direct contacts between Baku and Stepanakert. Because if we know the history, the most effective period of negotiations was when Artsakh was directly talking to Baku and vice versa. All the major documents, the ceasefire agreement, then a bunch of humanitarian initiatives, they are impossible without participation of Artsakh. Any progress, any tangible step forward would imply Artsakh's direct participation, and that is the opinion which has been shared also by the OSCE co-chairs. But in this situation, what happened up until now shows that the format which has been for the past few years after Artsakh was kind of left out of the negotiation, it doesn't lead to peace, it leads to war. We had escalation in 2016, we have full-scale war and aggression. Now, something has to be done about it, and something has to be done to make sure that it's a constructive process. The only way to move forward now, after so many aggressions against us, after so many attacks to kill us or de-Armenize Artsakh, just like they did with the rest of Armenian lands, albeit in Turkey, and their attempt of renewed genocide against our nations, leave no other option than to appeal for the world to recognize our independence, because it will provide Artsakh to use also the political and diplomatic means to defend our interests and our security, and it will help exclude and guarantee exclusion of a military option as a solution of the conflict, and it will eventually bring the peace back to the region, and everybody will benefit from it.
Asbed Kotchikian, following through on Robert's statement, if any mediating countries had illusions that some form of so-called highest level of autonomy within Azerbaijan was going to be a possibility for Nagorno-Karabakh, the last 2 weeks must have really killed those illusions. How do you think the current events are reshaping the landscape of negotiations and outcomes going forward?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is something that the Artsakh authorities have been saying, especially considering that the human rights violations or the situation of human rights in Azerbaijan itself, is that it doesn't instill any hope, any confidence in being part of an Azerbaijan one way or another. I would like to also add that in the context of the escalation and the fighting all-out war in the last that we've seen this year, I think there are two major factors to also consider. One, the disengagement of the U.S. and isolationist U.S. foreign policy, which actually rendered the West Sea mission weaker and hence gave an opportunity for Turkey as well to get engaged more directly. I think there is an adventurism. Erdogan's adventurism has a key point here. We've been seeing more and more that in the COVID-19 world, Turkey has become engaged in so many issues in so many regions, and this is also a continuation of that. Some of the things that I've been reading, and Robert alluded to it, is that reading into the situation, I wouldn't put past Erdogan to have started this or to instigate or to encourage Aliyev, to encourage Azerbaijan to start this new wave of attacks. And it seems that Azerbaijan is sort of also caught between the rock and the hard place, that they started something and they need to at least have some sort of a face-saving situation. But in terms of the process, in terms of the progress, I think you're absolutely right. Going back to what you asked, the question now is if there was any chance of coming up with some sort of a status, and I'm not going to go into details, that Artsakh could stay under the general official de jure Azerbaijani sort of sovereignty, that is completely out of the question, which in and by itself intensifies the conflict, because now both sides have become more maximalist in their positions. Armenia categorically would refuse, Artsakh will categorically refuse to be part of any formula framework under that. And Azerbaijan is sort of maximalist in terms of, okay, we're fed up with the West Sea Minsk process, and we're going to get the land by force, which only is escalating the situation. So being captive to the rhetoric to some extent, and also being misguided by Ankara.
There seems to be more acceptance of the idea of Artsakh as a sovereign state than before. Is that real, or is it just idle talk?
Well, I think, and Robert, feel free to chime in and correct me, but I feel that, yes, the rhetoric is there. There is more intensified demand. I mean, it has become more of a tenet in Armenian foreign policy, or Armenians in general, to recognize Artsakh, because recognition does come with certain elements of guarantees, guarantee of the population, the international community should be more active. But in return, I haven't seen any interest or any change of the status or perception that the international community might have on this issue. And Robert might be able to give a better perspective on this.
I agree with everything, and I just wanted to add that despite the general understanding that there is no going back of Artsakh to Azerbaijan, there is nothing to go back. It's not going back to Azerbaijan, because it means going back to the Soviet Union. That was the only period when Artsakh and Azerbaijan coexisted under common administrative umbrella. Independent Azerbaijan never had Artsakh as its part, so it's all purely claims. And I think that there is also another aspect the international community can play a more constructive role, is to make sure that Azerbaijan doesn't use the Artsakh problem for its domestic political reasons. We know that this guy is consistently criticized by the human rights watchdogs, by all the international organizations for exporting oil and corruption. Those are the two articles of their export. And Azerbaijan is trying to distract its public opinion from all the domestic shortcomings, be it economic or political, by this instigating from time to time attacks and creating this artificial image of an Armenian aggressive enemy, which is not there yet. There is nothing really on the ground which threatens Azerbaijan. 30 years of Artsakh's independence demonstrate that we don't threaten Azerbaijan's existence. Every attempt or any attempt to artificially squeeze us into a common administrative something will lead to what we have now, which is an all-out war, human suffering, destabilization, and unpredictability of tomorrow.
Robert, I think one of the issues that we have been following a lot is not that this is not just about a military showdown. I mean, there are a lot of elements here that we'd like to explore more. However, we're witnessing the use of technology. At any war that you witness around the world, it's usually a showcase of weapons to be able to sell it, to test it on the ground and so on. Just wanted to mention that. I don't want to go into more detail here depending on the time. Now to turn to Lara and ask Lara if, as of the last count, official count, there have been over 500 people killed as soldiers. But usually at times of war, civilians are marginalized. Civilians are usually forgotten and they become cannon fodder. Regardless of how this is going to end, and we hope that it will end, it's going to leave a major scar on our society. These are husbands, sons, fathers, students, and so on and so forth. But as I mentioned, where are the women in this context? Can you tell us about how women are engaged in this process, in the fight, in the survival? And specifically, how is the Women's Resource Center dealing with getting humanitarian assistance to the community, both in Artsakh and in Armenia?
Hi, everyone. As you mentioned, since the beginning, of course, with the casualties and specifically with the soldiers, and more than 500, which means like around 500 families who are dealing with this issue right now, and not only because it's affecting everyone in Armenia as well. Where are the women? Women are mobilized. Most of the women who are in Artsakh, some of them are still there. A good part of them are still there, but what we saw that they were very quick in mobilizing themselves and specifically sending their children, their younger children, infants to more secure places out of harm. Most of them coming to Armenia, temporarily displaced, as the Ombudsman mentioned as well. Half the population almost. But we see also that some of them are still staying behind to help out in the conflict areas. But in Armenia, we're witnessing more and more mothers with children coming since the first days, and now a little bit more because the situation is getting more dangerous. And what happened is that since the first days, we were able to mobilize very quickly. Actually, the whole society in Armenia has been mobilized. Not only the government is trying to help with different issues regarding this situation, but also organizations, individuals, everyone. Everyone is very engaged in different humanitarian aid, volunteering everywhere, trying to help with transportation, trying to help with gathering necessities, specifically not waiting for aid coming from somewhere else, but really helping each other to mobilize whatever it's needed. So for the past 2 weeks, our organizations, and not only our center, but many women's organizations that we have here, have been transformed to storage room for to gather humanitarian aid, whatever people needed, specifically women, mothers, elderly, and young children, including clothing, medical stuff, and hygiene stuff. Before the start of the war, we were mobilized to help different part of the population with COVID issues, with the pandemic, and now very quickly we transformed everything to help also people who were temporarily displaced because of the war. Our branch in Shushi and Stepanakert, and from the first days we were in contact to see what is being needed. And since we had this experience as well, it's not the first time that people are being displaced, especially what happened in April 2016 in Martagert. We were ready following this to mobilize very quickly. So we tried to arrange transportation to send the first necessities to Shushi and Stepanakert based on the needs that they were telling us from there on the ground, because many were coming to Stepanakert from the border region, especially young children who needed very basic things because it was all sudden and were not prepared in this area. So basically most of us are mobilized on preparing this humanitarian aid and also offering psychological help in different areas where people are being gathered in hotels, hostels, different centers in Yerevan and outside. And we have our psychologists who work usually at our hotline crisis centers being available, volunteering to go and meet with people and young children who came, some of them traumatized, some of them not understanding what is happening, trying to deal with the uncertain situation in a way.
Lara, I'm continually amazed at Armenia's ability to suddenly absorb a trauma like this. I guess, like you said, when we have enough experience year after year to deal with these problems, when we have 60,000 people or 70,000 people from Karabakh who have taken refuge in Armenia, where do they go? Is it mostly family-based support that kicks in, or is it support centers like yours and larger spaces that are allocated temporarily as shelter?
There are larger spaces allocated, shelters, temporary shelters. Most of them are being accommodated in those areas. Hotels are being transformed also to temporary residences, hostels. And there are also a lot of people who are welcoming families, individuals in their own homes. For example, I myself, we have a family here who's been here for the past 10 days, staying with us. And I think many people in Yerevan and outside are opening their doors to families who arrive here, because sometimes shelters are not enough and sometimes they arrive in the middle of the night, but there's always a hotline they can call, and social media a lot in mobilizing and trying to help each other also to see who has the necessities right now, who has an extra room. And it's actually done very quickly, and it's amazing to see how people are so organized in this way, without any chaos or as if it's something that they were prepared for over the years, and it's going quite smoothly, I would say, despite the situation.
Based on what Lara said, I want to jump in and try to put the question to Robert in a way that, in the law, in legal profession, there is a saying that it's not enough that the law should be applied, but it has to be seen that it is being applied. And Robert, based on what you're seeing there in terms of not about the law, but in terms of the aid and the assistance that is coming in and the support that there is, what is the overall sort of perception? Or do people realize, are aware that there are people in the not in the front line, but in the back at home, having their back and providing humanitarian and social services that are needed? And is that in any way making a difference?
It sure does, and I wanted to find a chance to thank Lara and persons like her and our all brothers and sisters in Armenia and around the world who are with us. We absolutely feel that support on various levels. Of course, what you asked, Lara, raises a very important question of the humanitarian aspect of all this, and of course this is a humanitarian crisis, and we try to raise a proper attention to that people are suffering, and there should be, again, it is very intertwined with the political processes, and there should be a remedy for Artsakhis for undergoing so many tragedies from Azerbaijan and attackers, and it should bear a consequence for the attackers. Yes, absolutely. We feel it here. We feel it in pretty much every aspect of our life, because life goes on in Artsakh. We feel it in the political field. We feel it in the humanitarian field. We feel that support which is pouring into us from Armenia and from all over the world, and probably that's the only way to go. I mean, we're together in this fight, and if everyone thinks that the front line is only here, no, it's not. The front line is all over the world. The front line is in Yerevan, in Washington, in France, in Paris, in Moscow, and everywhere where there are Armenians who feel part of the homeland. And we are absolutely proud that our nation realizes that to this extent.
And Robert, as a follow-up, I also wanted to ask you, one of the nature or the new nature of this warfare, other than the military technology, is also social media. How do you assess the overall social media activism or the social media warfare, if you want to call it, as it relates to the war, as it relates to the getting the news out? And so that I don't interrupt, again, maybe after that, Lara, you can also talk about that same issue, the same aspect as it relates to helping organize humanitarian assistance or mobilize resources and so on and so forth. So is this a mixed blessing? Is it a blessing at all to have the social media? And how are we faring? How is the situation faring?
It is an open place for communication, which can be both. It can be a blessing and it can be curse. It can be a blessing if you want to deliver your message to the rest of the world. It can be a blessing when somebody, just like Groong or other who are interested in the region can reach out and communicate and find out what's really going on the ground. It can be it can be not so constructive if it is used for propaganda or misinformation or instigating panic or just kind of promoting negative feelings among the population. We feel that. That's why a part of the general war is the information war, and that's why we pay so much attention to it. And we have mobilized all our efforts possible to make sure that we deliver our message, that we continue to fight against the anti-Armenian or counterproductive position by Azerbaijanis and Turks and many other supporters. This is happening in the peaceful time. You can imagine that during the ongoing war, it just like skyrocketed, and we see it everywhere. One of the aspects of this is that despite Armenia and Artsakh, which have absolutely unrestricted access to internet, and everybody is very free to deliver any information, it's not anyhow controlled whatsoever. In Azerbaijan, it is very tightly controlled, and they have a special team of specialists who are really working on it. The community, the society as a whole, they don't know what is really going on here. They don't know the real number of victims. They don't know the price they're paying for implementation of Aliyev's dreams. And there is a bunch of guys. We know that there are special departments in the information warfare thing, and they wage their part of the war. It can play both sides, of course. Just another weapon. Information has become a weapon long ago, and Azerbaijan is trying to use it as skillful as possible, but it backfires. People still find source of information, and they really know that it is not what they see on TV.
No, it can be a double-edged sword. Sorry, Lara, I just wanted to interject here before giving you the floor. But I have been communicating with individuals in Azerbaijan through my work, in academic work and so on. And one of the fascinating things that the question that I get, what is the international media saying? Which itself is telling that there's a media blackout. And it's dangerous in many ways. That keeping people in the dark can backfire hugely. But that is an issue that is has to be considered. So Lara, what about you? What in terms of your work? What is going on in terms of the usage of the social media and any other media or a medium, if you want to call it?
I think regarding humanitarian aspect, it was very essential to have social media. It helped a lot to mobilize very quickly and to find what is needed. For example, among our organizations, we are very quickly communicating. We have group chats where we exchange information, what is needed, who is gathering what, so we don't overstep, nothing is wasted, and we are able to respond to the exact needs of people. And what was good with that is that when people were arriving, not everybody knew where to call, what to do. And as soon as they were contacting one person, that person was just spreading the information over social media and getting very quickly a response on where to get the diapers, where to get the food, where to get, shelter. And it was made easier, and it helped also those who were arriving in a very difficult situation not to wait for a long time and have immediately access to help. It also helped as well to see where the need is regarding, for example, whenever there was a need in hospitals for volunteers or for a blood drive or just a post on social media, and a lot of people were gathering, in a minute, which was really very good in a way that how we were able to self-organize and respond very quickly.
Robert, earlier you mentioned that you've witnessed, this is the major war, the War of Independence, and now I've witnessed it both unfortunately from far. But I wanted to get your point is, how do you feel, briefly if possible, but you can make the comparisons. How is now different than 1988, 1990s, early 1990s? Not just in terms of the technology, the warfare, but what are some of the things that stand out? And what are some of the things that are very similar?
Well, it's hard to detach the technological difference. I mean, the biggest difference we see is in the technology. The biggest, also another thing, is surprisingly how tolerant the international community is towards terrorists showing up right in the near their borders or in the regions which have been traditionally not poisoned by the international terrorism. We also, what is not surprising is that the same tactics of what what they called ambiguity towards the parties. And so there are similarities and there are differences, but I would say that the biggest thing, and the new thing also, probably the major political new thing here, is that Azerbaijan, also from one side, they say that they treat Artsakh Armenians as their own citizens, but this is not just one case, this is not just even two cases, this is already the third major case of genocidal killing of all the Armenians in Artsakh. And I think if anyone had any utopia that the first war was, I don't know, for whatever reasons, that the second war had sparked from a minor incident, this time I think Azerbaijan just put the final exclamation mark that it's real. A goal towards Armenians of Artsakh and Armenia in general is genocidal, purely genocidal, that Turkey's expansionism is not covered anymore. It's pretty much open and it's functioning as the article on their foreign policy agenda, and they can do whatever it takes, even involve international terrorists. So two things new. I just recall the second thing. One, Azerbaijan has finalized the understanding, and everyone should not have any utopia about their real intentions about Artsakh. So if you call Armenians of Artsakh your competitors and you pour long-range missiles on sleeping cities and try to kill every one of them, there is a clear dissonance. And the second thing is that Azerbaijan has forever tied its name as a terrorist country. They have forever marred their international image or whatever they had so far with involving international terrorists for solution of their domestic or foreign or whatever possible political reasons. I think those are the things which are here forever.
And continuing on this sort of, and it might be difficult because there are so many examples that you might give, but I was wondering, Robert, do you have a human moment that you've witnessed in the last 2 weeks that stands out in your mind? It can be anything that resonated with you and has been in your mind. And I will ask the same Lara to talk about it as well.
Absolutely, and tens, if not hundreds of times. And probably this will echo with Lara's sphere of work, because we have really brave young ladies who are working with us shoulder to shoulder, who never complain, who don't cry when the missiles blow up a few meters from where we are, or when we hear what's going on here. Absolutely sense of selfless love to this piece of land, selfless love to our homeland, the strength to overcome all the difficulties, unimaginable optimism that we're going to rebuild everything, we're going to stay here, we're going to punish the aggressors, and we will stay here. And we see those examples every day. I mean, everyone had the chance to go. No, there is no any restriction, and everyone could relocate. But particularly the team I am with, my foreign affairs family, foreign office family, Ministry of Foreign Affairs family, and the people who are fighting with us on this front, on the international front, they just demonstrate, you cannot imagine. The personal courage is there, the love towards homeland is there, the optimism is there. That's why we say that it's impossible to conquer Artsakh, and moreover to conquer Artsakh.
Lara, how about you? A human moment, something that with your work it just resonated or it just stood out in your mind.
I think it was the first days when we were in one of the stores and trying to buy many shoes for the children who were coming, and they needed it because they escaped because of the emergency situation. And the lady was selling, all this, and she said she understood that it was for Artsakh, and she started giving us more shoes, and then she said, maybe you need, the socks with that, take it, just take it there and not asking for money. For me, it was really important to see that, and it was really touching because in a matter of a day, everybody forgot about their business and everything else. They just wanted to concentrate on how to help each other, and it was really such a very, caring, a collective care that started. And I got the impression that in general, when there's a war going somewhere, people want to escape from it and, find travel or leave the country. It seems that in Armenia we have the opposite. The more the war is going, the more people want to come, and there are a lot of them coming or just taking the road and going to Goris and then Stepanakert and not, trying to escape the other way. And for me, that was really amazing to see that people are, helping each other and staying strong for each other, especially with all these young men who are leaving. And it takes a lot of courage for mothers, sisters, and wives to say goodbye to their loved ones. And they're doing it quite with a lot of, courage, I would say. Without this, as it was mentioned as well, that all the support is here. and there's no, holding back or in a way.
Yeah, it's fascinating when we talk about war, it's always dehumanizing, but then these are the human moments that make everything put in perspective. And we have been dealing with this issue on Groong, from a meta-analysis, but we have to always keep in mind the context, the human context. War dehumanizes, and we need to remember that these are humans. These are not just numbers we talk about. These are not just places that have been destroyed. These are livelihoods, people, and so on and so forth. So I appreciate those comments and those examples that you put forward.
Those are very uplifting thoughts. I'd like to give Lara and Robert an opportunity to say some closing thoughts. Lara?
I'm hoping that this will lead to more sustainable peace in our countries and in the region. And I'm hoping that after this, we will be able to continue what we started and all this unity and continue building and continue believing and hoping and working together. And I really want to thank as well the efforts of the diaspora. It's really helpful on different level, morally, to see all the support and mobilization around the world, and also supporting financially and humanitarian aid as well. It's really great to see that how much people are coming together on this tough moments. And despite this negativity and all this hardship that presently the situation is, there's a lot of positivity, and I want to, emphasis on that. People are forgetting about this hardship and they're trying to help and believe that things will change. And I'm very hopeful in that area.
Thank you very much for your interest again. And I just wanted to reiterate our gratitude that every Artsakhi has towards each and every of our compatriots. We know that our brothers and sisters in Armenia look after the families which had to flee, and we appreciate it very much. We know that we are together, we feel as part of the family. And of course, we are also very proud that our diaspora is raising their voice for what's going on here. I hope that we will continue doing so with great patience and persistence to make sure that words turn into actions and actions lead to results. Other than that, the Army of Defense of Artsakh and the whole army of Armenians around the world, we believe that we will prevail and we will punish the aggressors, and we intend this to be the last fight for the freedom of Artsakh.
Thank you everyone for your time. Stay strong, stay Artsakh strong. Haqteluenk.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Ampayman.
Thank you.
And that concludes our program for this episode of Groong Week in Review. We hope it has helped your understanding of some of the issues from this previous week. We look forward to your feedback and suggestions for issues to cover in greater depth. Contact us on our website at groong.org, that's GROONG, and on our Facebook page, ANN-Groong, or in our Facebook group, Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Lara Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm Humanitarian, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you next week.